Wow. Okay, so we are being recorded right now. This is our CE committee meeting for May 27th. We have three items now on the agenda, which is slightly different from what I sent y'all earlier. We have a second course that we have two titles. Let me just give you those titles real fast. I know you'll have the information via email and or in your dashboards, but the first course is from it's another government agency. Lee, I know you and Chris both reviewed it. I was just telling Jeremy a little more about it. It's called Group Therapies for Persons with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And then the second course is, I'm going to butcher it, but I'm going to say Mastery Unlocking Lower Back and Hip Relief. So basically, the task as a committee is, do you all three agree that these two courses should be sent to the board for consideration of denial at the June board meeting? And then our last item is discussion of some changes to the CE policy. We have an hour of time scheduled for this meeting, and I've mentioned to Jeremy, Chris, and Lee, would you be terribly opposed if I timed our meeting? I do have another meeting after this, and I imagine y'all probably have patients and other things too.
I'm good.
Yeah, you can time it.
Okay. Okay, sweet. I think if we have three items, I'll do 20 minutes per item. I'll give y'all a heads up if we're getting close, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
Okay, sweet. So I'm gonna go ahead and start my timer. Would y'all be comfortable starting with those two course applications, talking about those?
Sure.
Okay, great. So which one would you like to start with? And I can put information on the screen.
Let's do the course application for the iliopsoas mastery or the unlocking the low
Okay,
back pain course.
absolutely. Let's see. So that one I haven't saved as a PDF. I'm going to share with you the original email, which has the your analysis in it.
Which of you all got this one first? Was it Chris? Was this
That
one
was
you?
me.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Chris was the target of both of these.
Yes,
Okay.
he was.
They were both good catches, Chris. So,
Okay, can
so
you guys see that?
mhm.
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay.
So I did the analysis for this course after Chris, wanted some additional feedback. Chris, did you have a chance to review the analysis?
Yes, I did.
So what was your reservation with this course?
My reservation was it was a massage therapist. I think her degree was in something non-PT, kinetic, kinesiology, anything related, but basically a massage therapist teaching a course, and I just wanted a little extra feedback on that since it was a licensed massage therapist and not physical therapist teaching this course.
Mhm. Did you have any reservations about the course content?
For the content, it wouldn't have been if it wasn't being taught from a massage basis instead of more of a anatomy basis.
All right. So when I did the analysis, the I had issues, primarily with the instructor because of the content. The course instructor in this instance, this was a completely virtual course, and it was done in an asynchronous format, so it wasn't live. And this instructor was proposing to teach the ability to evaluate impairments in the iliopsoas muscle through palpation, and other assessment techniques, and then prescribe intervention based off that assessment. And that is completely divergent to how manual therapy courses are taught in our profession. You would not teach manual therapy courses in an asynchronous format through a completely virtual medium. And on top of that, the content that she was trying to teach does not have established clinical utility. The reliability of palpation of the iliopsoas musculature has not been established. And so the idea that she was going to try to teach that through an asynchronous format, and then without having any opportunity to be able to assess the participants and to determine if they were actually palpating what they were thinking they were palpating, I thought was completely divergent, from how we normally teach manual therapy courses. So for that reason, I thought the content was ineligible, for approval. In terms of her credentials, we updated the board's policy last year, in March of last year, and to have content, to have some additional guidance on speaker credentials. And then so in terms of this individual, she's a licensed massage therapist. She's got a long-standing history, of practice in her field. She has taught in her field. I don't argue that she is a qualified instructor for massage therapists and a qualified instructor, for massage therapy students. I think she's disqualified as an instructor for physical therapists for our approval because of the content she's trying to teach. And so, even if this was a physical therapist trying to teach palpation of the iliopsoas musculature through an asynchronous virtual format, I would still think it would be disqualified. So the idea is I think this should go to the board, for the board to kind of discuss and determine, if this is, something they want to, this is something they want to endorse. As I said, I don't think it's in the board's interest. It's not in the public safety or public interest for us to be endorsing courses that aren't based in science, aren't based, in evidence, and are taught in a format through which the instructor cannot certify that the participants can safely perform the content that they're trying to teach. I don't think that is in the public's best interest. As an overall overarching, guiding principle. So had this been done in a live format, had this been done in a format in which the instructor, could verify that the participants in the course are actually palpating and actually performing these examination techniques correctly, we could open up for discussion. We could open up to the discussion of whether or not these techniques have any clinical utility. But in this format, I don't think this is an appropriate format to teach this kind of course.
And that's what I meant when I was talking about content, not necessarily that it wasn't a content that could be appropriate. It was, if it was a physical therapist in a live course, I could see this possibly being a course. But it was as a massage therapist, asynchronous. That's what I was more concerned with.
Your concerns are valid. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah, I have the same concerns with this course. So, I mean, Jeremy, do you have any commentary?
My only statement would be I completely agree with the lack of value for keeping the public safe in a manual therapy course in which the instructor can't accurately assess the students and whether or not they have properly gained the knowledge and the skill. So I agree completely with what you said on that. So.
When we presented, Jessica gave us the summary, of the last few years of all the courses, that we've approved, and the vast majority of them are online. The vast majority of them are virtual. They are, in an asynchronous virtual type format. And so at one point, all manual therapy courses needed to be done in person. I mean, at one point, all clinical coursework was done in person. There was a requirement that we had to have so many hours of in-person education. And now, since the pandemic, this has diverged from that. And now the majority of the education is virtual. But I think it is for the committee's standpoint, I think we need to look at the content and we need to look, and determine, okay, is this content appropriate to be taught in a virtual format? Even if it's from a course sponsor that we've previously, approved courses for, I think we have to look at it from a public safety standpoint. Is this course content and is the evaluation components of the course, do they really serve the public interest and safety?
And I was going to say, I would also point out to the committee that this is not even a live webinar. It's fully recorded.
It's fully asynchronous.
Yeah, it's not like it's a live, not like there's a recorded portion and then there's a live webinar lab or something. So I think, yeah, I pulled the application because I was curious from my standpoint, but hearing you all discuss, I feel like this if anyone were to be watching this recording in the future, they'd see this shows that, you guys are approving, Chris's review did its job, coming in and bringing Lee and Jeremy, you both in, showing that this is doing its job. You guys are being given a critical eye to things, and it's not just if one person has an issue, clearly it's raising beyond that. And the vast majority of courses, there's not issues.
Yeah, no, the vast majority of the courses that we've approved, are, have been approved. We deny very few, but I do think,
Yeah.
I think moving forward, I think it is in the interest of, the public safety and well-being that we look at the course content and we determine, okay, is the course content, can it be taught through a virtual medium? And can the individuals who are participating in these courses, can their competency, be appropriately determined, particularly if it's a manual therapy course. If it's being taught in a virtual medium and it's asynchronous, we need to look at this and say, okay, can the individual who's taking this course, how do they demonstrate their competency? How can we ensure that they can safely, and, accurately perform the techniques that they are learning in this format, with citizens in Louisiana? So I think public safety needs to be taken into consideration.
And I think from a staff perspective, the policy that we have, people ask me often, you think this will get approved? I think the policy gives the committee and then therefore the board the ability to look critically at some of these to determine if the delivery method is also an issue for what's being taught, which it sounds like this is what this boils down to is you could talk about it otherwise, but right now the delivery method itself is a hindrance.
My biggest problem with this course is the manner in which this instructor proposes to teach these techniques and then proposes to evaluate the competency of the students in this course. And so, and for that reason, I think this needs to go to the board.
Okay. It sounds like all three of you are in agreement. You would like to then forward this to the June board meeting for a potential denial.
We would. Yes.
Okay,
Chris,
great.
you okay with that?
Yes.
Can
I
we
was-
make a note just to, and this is just a general statement, but I agree with, like I said, I agree with everything everybody says. When this comes up for discussion in front of the board, we need to make sure that the board understands we're not just discussing this course. As you said, Lee, the board needs to have a discussion about moving forward with manual therapy online courses. About are we going to, be in the business of approving these if the instructor can't physically assess the students. So I'd like to make sure that the discussion at the board meeting continues in that route, because otherwise we're going to have to revisit this over and over again.
I think,
I agree.
Chris, you're going to be in attendance in June.
I plan to be.
Okay, and then so another thing I can also do to assist the committee is this recording can be made available along with the prep materials if you would like, and that way board members would have the ability to review our meeting today and your comments as well as they go into considering these courses, and that can help inform whatever discussion comes out of the meeting.
Sounds great.
I agree.
Okay.
That sounds good. Thank you,
Awesome.
Jessica.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, let me pause that. So then that is our first course. I'm going to stop sharing real quick so I can switch our documents out. And I'm going to pull up the other course. I already saved this one as a PDF. I'm going to save the other one as well. Let's see here. Thank y'all for your patience. I'm always doing too many things. There we go. All right, so let me share this screen. This is our second course that you guys were going to discuss. This is the more recent one that I believe, Lee, you sent me commentary on. Your analysis was that Tuesday I received it, or maybe it was Monday while we were off? I'm not sure.
It was
Early
late
in the week.
Monday night.
Yeah.
I sent it Monday night.
Yeah, this is the next one. I'll go ahead and start our timer. So this is the course that was submitted by another state agency. I always fail to remember their name, and I apologize for that. But essentially,
It was the association, was the American Association for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. It's the Louisiana chapter of that organization.
Let's see. I think that was here's the complicating factor is that sometimes their paperwork is not um, updated every time they submit something. So I'm trying to look up exactly what they're called. It's not necessarily relevant what they're called. I'm just for my own reference. But essentially, this is another government agency that in the past the board has approved to review and not charge them a fee. Oh, here it is. It's the OCDD Resource Center, which is apparently a part of the Louisiana Department of Health. So I received these applications, paper applications. I'll forward them to one of you guys. Usually when in case y'all didn't know my strategy, when I receive like singular applications, I often send them to Chris, just based upon availability. I know that Jeremy, you like to review in batches, so I get a batch, and I often will send you some when it's been a while, especially. It just helps with the turnaround because I've learned how y'all like to work, and so I try to respect that. But anyway, Chris started with reviewing this one, and we asked them some clarifying questions, which I'm not sure if we got a good answer to. I'll leave that to Lee to respond to. But essentially, so this is the group therapies for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities course. I'll hand it over to you.
Chris, you reviewed this one, correct?
Yes, I'm trying to remember it now. Yeah, okay, I'll review that one.
What brought pause? What gave you pause with this course?
Was it something based for physical therapists? It was
Mhm.
talked about a lot of group discussions. It looked like it was more of a psychological type course than it was a physical therapy course.
Mhm. Yeah, so this was actually, so I reviewed this, and the content for this is actually a workshop. And so this workshop is being taught by Dr. Jay Seven, and he presented his work at last fall's meeting for this agency, the Louisiana chapter of the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So they had a meeting last September in Alexandria. He presented, his work at this meeting, and then this is a workshop that is going to expand upon that further. And the content, his work is geared towards managing depression, anxiety, and anger management issues in persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And he does this through group therapy. And he's created, three specific group therapy programs, and one is about developing social skills, one is promoting a healthy lifestyle, and one is mindfulness and developing mindfulness-based skills. So we asked the course sponsor, was participation in last fall's meeting, in attendance at last fall's meeting, a prerequisite for participating in this workshop? And they told us, no, it's not. And so then we asked, okay, well, can you ask Dr. Seven to give us some more feedback on how his work specifically relates to the practice of physical therapy and meets the eligibility requirements that are established by rule? And Jessica, you did share the rules with them, correct?
Yes, I didn't just copy and paste, but I made sure to even format them correctly and gave them both of the rules that you referenced so that they had that to go by when they were crafting their answers. Yes.
When they gave us feedback, they didn't answer the questions that we asked specifically. They just said that Dr. Seven promotes, a team-based, group-based approach to the management, of these issues in persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So in the course application, the target audience in the application that they gave us to review didn't indicate that the target audience for this content was physical therapists or occupational therapists or speech therapists. So based on the information that we received, I agree with Chris. There's insufficient evidence from what we've been presented to demonstrate how this course content meets the eligibility requirements established by rule. And so, Rule 191 says that the course activity and content must contribute directly to the professional competence of the licensee, and it is supposed to be evidence-led and, content that, is based on physical therapy practice. I mean, that's what our current rules say. And so I have a hard time, trying to make the connection between what Dr. Seven is teaching, and physical therapy practice. And so, I think this probably needs to go in front of the board.
Chris and Jeremy, you guys good with that?
I'm good.
Good with this going in front of the board, absolutely.
Okay, great. So we will forward this application as well. And that will be included again. We thank you for your analyses because I like to include those with our materials for everything. So I will make sure that all gets put together. And when we prep for the June 17th meeting, that will be included with the prep materials for these two courses, along with the recording of this particular meeting. So
I mean,
awesome.
and Jessica confirmed that we didn't have any licensees who went to the meeting last fall and requested, CEU credit for attending the meeting. And so we may not even have any licensees who are trying to attend this workshop. So if we had a licensee who had gone to the workshop or gone to the conference and then could demonstrate to us, who could provide, feedback to us on how this content benefited them as a physical therapist and met the eligibility requirements, that would be points of discussion that we could have. But at this point, we don't have any of that. So,
Would you, so I had my meeting after this CE committee meeting is ironically about the reporting that we discussed at the board meeting to find out what's possible for me to pull in terms of who is attending the courses, how many people are attending the courses that we approve. So that's what I'm actually having a meeting about after this. But I really briefly could actually show you the history for this course sponsor and what the attendance for their courses look like if the committee would like to see that. We have time still on this topic.
Sure.
Okay, let me just switch that real quickly.
OCD, what does OCD, what does that stand for?
I actually Googled them for you while we were talking, or you guys were chatting, and so that is the Office for Citizens with Developmental
Okay,
Disabilities.
yeah.
Yeah, they're based in Baton Rouge, I think, and also possibly in Central Louisiana. They have both a 225 and 318 contact number. So, can you guys see the screen here?
Mhm.
Okay, so great. This is the content management system. This is what our staff works in. So this is what I see. I rarely see the dashboards that y'all see. But just as a snapshot for this particular course sponsor, you can see course titles here, and then these are the courses that the years they were approved for. So for instance, we have a 2025 right here. We have one for 2026, which is brand new, and then one down here. We also have a second page. It spills over into there's one 2025 here. Does not look like anyone has reported taking this one. Let me flip back to the first page though. So right here, the number of licensees, this tells me how many licensees have reported these courses on a renewal application. So for instance, right here in 2019, this communication for effective clinical intervention for people with IDD. This is 7 years ago. Don't know what, any details of this course. It's been a long time, but 11 people took that course. But then you also have this particular course right here, which was non-pharmacologic considerations in prescribing psychotropics to IDD. This was 2025, a live webinar. We did not have any licensees attend this. So just to give you a snapshot so you can see sort of what maybe the interest in the courses presented by this agency is.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
interesting.
yeah, I would include that information for the board to consider, Jessica. I mean, because that's something that the board has to take into consideration, is, how much are we going to scrutinize, course content from other government agencies? Certainly physical therapists work, with children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so the idea is this content may be valuable, to, a physical therapist, working, in that field. But it would have been beneficial for Dr. Seven to provide greater clarity on how the specific group therapy programs that he has developed, what is the role of physical therapy in those programs? And does physical therapy have a role in those programs? And so, that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah. How does it fit into an interdisciplinary?
Right. How does it fit? And understanding these are the rules that we have to make determinations on. Rule 191 and Rule 195. This establishes the eligibility criteria for course content. Well, please review this and then give us some feedback. tell us how your course content meets this eligibility criteria.
And I think a challenge to that is that what I understand when they submit things to me is that they're hosting this. And so the individual who communicates with me and sends me the documentation is the one who is answering those questions. I don't know, I do not know if they did or did not go to Dr. Seven and ask for their clarification. It could have just come from them. I don't want to say for certain, but I know that the person I'm communicating with is not Dr. Seven himself. So that's also a contributing factor. But okay, that's no problem. So I will take care of that. I got your note here, so I will get a snapshot of that history as well, just of the courses they have submitted, so that the board can see that, so that you all can have a robust conversation about it, especially with everything going on. So, okay, great. That's our first two things. That then takes us to talking about the CE policy, if you guys are ready for that. Awesome. Okay.
We're on schedule.
We are very on schedule. You guys are great. Thank y'all so much. And I hate being on a time crunch, but I also want to get that information from Covalent Logic for you so we can find out what we can do with that. So I'll just reintroduce what we're talking about with the CEU policy. So the first thing that we talked about was adding a line, and I did go speak with you, Lee, over email, and we decided that in the policy area here is where it made sense to add it. This paragraph specifically, you'll see in the underlined red text, the additional line we're proposing to add is courses will be reviewed against the version of this policy at the time the course application is submitted. This came up in a recent board meeting earlier in the year when an individual, I think y'all remember, submitted a course that had been their coworker, their colleague had it approved in a previous year in 2020, late December 24, before the policy changed in March 25, and unfortunately they didn't get approved for themselves. So that's, I think, part of what brought this about, is to make some clarification in the policy so that licensees do understand how it works and when and how the version that's going to be used for approving their courses. So that's the first change. And then something else that's come up recently in discussion about these two courses is the understanding of the speaker minimum qualifications. There are 4 criteria right here, and I'm going to ask Jeremy and Chris to speak to this more than myself. You guys have been working with CEs a lot longer than I have. My memory was that these criteria should have like an or behind them. You have to meet this or this. However, I understand, I think Lee, your interpretation was that it might be an and. And so we wanted to bring it to the committee as a whole to see what has been the historical take on this, and also what should be the interpretation going forward, and should we include either and or in the policy. I know it's a very small word, but for clarification purposes, it might be important. So I'll let y'all discuss that.
You can go ahead, Chris, if you want to.
I know we've looked at it in the past, especially those first two were considered sometimes an or. I think the last one was, we had talked about, basically it was an and. We were trying to get it to where the speaker was qualified and they were somebody that would benefit the practice of physical therapy.
Mhm.
Trying not to make it too small of a window, even some of the therapists working with, to where they could meet. But we're trying to also exclude areas where they wouldn't have an expertise that pertain to physical therapy.
That's how I interpret it as well, is more of an or a combination, as opposed to you have to meet these 4 requirements. Because we've had multiple debates over the past couple of years about what constitutes the proper or the appropriate education, or what constitutes related to the practice of physical therapy. And because of the fact that over the last few years, we've had so many more courses that, had different aspects of what they're asking us to review that maybe didn't fit the traditional idea of therapy. I think we've seen many more instructors that we've got to take a more global look at how they're meeting the level of expertise that we would like them to have when teaching these courses to our individuals, and then ensuring that this is going to be provided in a safe fashion to individuals in the state.
Yeah, I mean, recall in the fall, in the summer of 2024 is when we started discussing this. You know, we decided discussing revising, the policy and clarifying this. And again, back then, remember that we were at that time thinking about, possibly turning the CE approval process over to a third party. So it was very important for us to provide clear and transparent guidance within the policy on what our expectations were. And, and so we decided to, update this. And then what we realized is that we don't always get a CV. We don't always get a CV on all of the speakers. That was brought to our attention. And sometimes all we get is a course bio. I mean, we get the course instructor or speaker bio that's included in the course prep materials and the course application. So then we need to have some clear guidance. Okay, well, what needs to be included in the course in the instructor bio? If all we're going to get is a speaker or instructor bio, what are the types of things that we're looking for? And so when we revised this and presented this to the board for approval, I want to point out that, the language says that the information that we're requiring about the course instructor or speaker may include these four criteria, but it's not limited to these four criteria. It doesn't say that it must include these four criteria. It says may, and we reserve the right to ask for additional information. So these are not the only four criteria that you take into consideration. Obviously, if somebody has a degree in physical therapy, they have a post-secondary degree in physical therapy, and they have 5 years of clinical practice in the field of physical therapy, and they have expertise in the subject matter which they're teaching, and they have prior experience teaching this subject matter, then that is somebody who would be strongly considered a board-approved speaker. But we would have to look at the information that we're provided, and as you said, holistically look at this and determine, is this going to be a board approved speaker for licensees? Are we going to give this speaker credit towards the content that they're providing for licensees? One of the questions that was brought up to Charlotte actually brought this up is the criteria of the course instructor speaker. The second criteria, line number 2, is the course instructor speaker must hold a valid license to practice within their profession if required by the regulatory body in their jurisdiction. So is that something that needs to be in this, or is this something that we can strike? Because her thought was that if you are an educator or a researcher, even in our field, if you may be a professional educator in our field, you may be a researcher in our field, but you don't hold a valid license because you don't have a clinical practice. So you have let your license go into inactive status. It's you're no longer practicing. You don't maintain your license. It's now inactive. Would that disqualify you? From being considered a board-approved speaker, based on these minimum qualifications. What are your thoughts on that?
My thought on that is, I think I agree with Charlotte's points and your points there, Liev, about being an educator, an academician, and not necessarily having to have the valid license to be able to provide value and teach the course. I guess my only question I'd kind of like the language to say, and I'm not going to word it correctly right now, certainly, that if they have to have a license, that the license is in good standing.
Yeah.
That's how I would like that to read, is you don't have to have a license to teach the course, but if you are in a clinical setting every day and you are required to have a license, that your license is not under review, under suspension, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's a point that I brought up, because the question would be, if your license within your regulatory agency was not in good standing, and you were under suspension, or your license had been revoked, is that something that we should be able to take into consideration? that we should be able to take into consideration when we're making determinations of who we're going to say is a board approved speaker. And I agree. I mean, I think that is something we should take into consideration. So Jessica, we may want to edit that line to say the course instructor speaker maintains a license, in good standing, a license to practice within their profession, in good standing with their regulatory body in their jurisdiction, as applicable.
Okay, I don't think I caught quite all of that. Let's see.
The course
Uh,
instructor speaker maintains a license to practice in their profession in good standing with the regulatory body in their jurisdiction as applicable.
do you agree with that grammar? Where I put the comma?
Course instructor maintains a license to practice in their profession. Maintains a license to practice in their profession in good standing with the regulatory body in their jurisdiction. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. No, that's good. And I think, coming back up to here, I want to revisit this and ask y'all if y'all decide you want to do or, just for clarification, add the word or. And one thing I would throw out there to y'all is I see also administrative courses. And so you could have someone who spent 20 years working for Blue Cross Blue Shield and is qualified to teach you about billing and billing codes, for documentation purposes. They wouldn't fit every single one of them. So, but they would be qualified to teach you about billing in this
I-
area.
What's the word?
I think-
I don't
Go ahead.
disagree. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
With the word may in there, that opens the door for it can be all of these. It
Okay.
may be a few of them. The word may really kind of gives us a little more leeway to where
Okay, that makes
the
sense.
main thing is that we're looking to make sure this applies to physical therapy and is somebody qualified to teach whatever they're teaching.
Okay,
That's
that makes sense. Yeah,
That's how
exactly what
I
was
read it,
gonna
Jess.
say.
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
fine. I'm down with that. So you guys edited this line. We'll recommend this line and we'll delete this portion here. We'll recommend that deletion, should I say. And then up here, we talked about this. I'm assuming y'all are okay with this language here.
Yeah.
Is there anything else with the policy you'd like to bring up while we're talking about it and have time? We still have a bit of time. Those are the only things I knew about that were in question.
There was a discussion at the last board meeting about course content that is explicitly a sales presentation, by
Yes.
a vendor. And so the idea is, do we need a statement in the policy that says that course content and activities, that are, explicitly, sales related, sales presentations, or something of that nature will be ineligible, for continuing education credit. Because the other doctoral professions cannot get credit for attending a sales presentation by any of the industries, whether it be whether it be pharmaceutical industry or whether it be a biotech industry. They cannot get sales credit and they cannot get CME credit for attending a sales presentation. So do you guys think that needs to be in the policy? Or do you think we've got a good handle on that?
I don't
But
think we need to be as specific. I mean, to me, the only reason to be that specific is, having that direction for when people on this particular committee change. Obviously, we have a really good understanding of that now, thanks to that. But I don't know that we need to be that specific. But that's just my opinion. I mean, what do y'all think?
I think
So what's your
look at it
feeling?
on a case by case basis. Because there's gonna be sometimes where it's education on a necessarily a sales talk, but education on how to use a system as opposed to here's the product I'm selling, here's what y'all need to do with it.
And
I'd like to add. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jess.
I was just going to add from the admin perspective, this is the first time this has come up that I've been the entire time I've
Oh,
been
wow.
doing
Okay.
this. I can't recall another, I mean, Chris, Jeremy, you might know better than me, but I cannot recall another course application being submitted that was primarily a sales situation. And again, I don't have any recollection of anything. This is the first time and the only time thus far.
And I could see a scenario. Let me just play this scenario. And this is why I would like for this to remain a little more vague. I could see a scenario where a PT leaves practice, decides to go sell whatever the device is. There has been research on this particular device, and the device research supports that this device is better at stretching or whatever the outcome you want is than anything else. Manual market doesn't matter. If a PT who meets the speaker requirements is going to go talk to a department about a particular device, which has been shown by research to be more effective, it's best practice, whether they buy it or not. To me, that's not necessarily it is a sales pitch, but it also is educational about best practice. And so I can see where there is benefit from that, even if it is part of a sales pitch.
Yeah, I mean, what I will to that, what I would say is that the pharmaceutical industry, you know, physicians cannot get CME credit for attending a presentation by a pharmaceutical sales rep on their products, even if they're presenting, the research supporting the use of their products. So the requirements are for for speaker for CME credit is they have to be independent, and they cannot be industry sponsored. And so the idea is that now industry can be a sponsor for a conference, and we have that too. Like we have when you go to APTA and you go to CSM or you go to any of the big meetings, we get sponsors. All of the manufacturers for rehab products will be sponsors, and they'll have booths in the exhibit hall, and they'll go and they'll sell their wares in the exhibit hall, and they can sponsor the conference. But to get CME credit, the speaker has to be independent of industry. And it has to be evidence-based. So if they were a sales rep, even if they were a physician who's gone become a sales rep, if what they were presenting was, all about the drugs that their company was selling, and they weren't independent, then they would not be eligible for CME credit.
Okay.
So that's just something that, that we have to just take into consideration, is that, there's already precedent established by other doctoring professions, on how you evaluate speakers and the content associated with their teaching. And Jess, what I will tell you is that we don't get a lot of sales pitches for in rehab. Like
Yeah.
it's not like the medical industry, like
Yeah.
with drug reps are constantly knocking on doctors' doors trying to get in their into their offices. We'll occasionally get sales reps, that come by the hospital, and want to show us their products, but it's not like the physicians.
Yeah, I like I said, there's no precedent for it because in terms of just us receiving them, should I say, because this is again the first time that I can recall us receiving such an application, and it did come from APTA Louisiana. I know it was a district meeting, and I know it was conjunction with that, and I understand, there's no judgment or anything of that, but I do think the circumstances and how we got this application, they're just not the usual. I don't think a lot of those companies, even if they were to be trying to sell you guys something like, custom inserts or inserts in general, that's just not, they don't really look to state boards, I don't think, to be like, let's get some people here to attend our stuff and they'll get CE credit. I could be wrong, it could change. But
It could, yeah. I mean, it very well
no,
could.
from the administrative perspective, though, this is just the first and thus far the only time we've seen anything of that nature, and so it's not a common thing. And yeah, I like to give you guys facts. That's all I'm here to
Yeah,
do.
it's fairly common to get the little educational opportunities, but putting it in for continuing education credit for your licensure, that's the first time I've seen that for a sales pitch. We have we have educational opportunities, what the vendor calls them here, periodically, but we've never submitted those for CEU credit.
Hmm. And I've never received requests from like clinics or anything to do that when they've hosted those. Now I've had people contact me like, hey, my clinic is hosting CPR. And of course, the board historically does not approve CPR courses because that's not advanced training. That's, basic. But I mean, those are the kind of things typically, like if a clinic were to host something, they'd contact us with and say, hey, would the board give credit for this? Something that is more education based. And there are clinics who do host course sponsors and have them come in and train their people on a specific course, and they'll get that course approved, but it's not a sales thing. It's actually education. So, yeah.
And so, Chris, so do you think that we should explicitly state that in the CE policy, or should we just, you know, evaluate it on a case by case basis?
I think it's better leaving it like it is in the policy. There are some, like I'm thinking of a couple of systems where you're getting education of once you've bought it, how to actually use this that could be considered possible Con Ed, some of the advanced systems, how to use them, not necessarily please come buy this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any objection to to just evaluating it on a case by case basis, and then, if we determine that this is just a sales pitch and there's no other educational value to it, that we deny it and send it back to the board.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was our agenda for this meeting then. So I want to thank you guys for making the time. I appreciate y'all. I know we usually do them over lunches. That seems to be what works best for y'all. So I thank y'all for making the time for it. And I got my notes. I'm gonna get all this compiled together so that we'll have this in prep with the prep documents for the June 17th meeting. And I know we'll see Chris and Lee, and then I'm sure Jeremy, I'll see you again another time this year. I've already seen you a couple times. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Before we conclude,
Awesome.
since you guys, Chris and Jeremy, since you guys are doing the bulk of the review, is there anything else in the policy that would help you guys? Is there any additional clarification in the policy that you think would be helpful, to do your work?
Not that I can think of.
No other edits? Okay.
No, so much of what we look at, we've done it so often. We feel confident about what we're looking at and how to look at it. It just becomes a matter of presenting, when we see the things that stick out like sore thumbs, we know they still have to go to the board. So it's not like if we clarified it more, we could do more approving or denying. It's still got to run through the board in a lot of cases. So everything that we have is at our fingertips that we need. So at least
Yeah, I mean,
that's the way I look at it.
any issues that you guys have, any denials that you guys want to make, need to go to the board.
Hey,
So
one quick question. The course that y'all were just referencing in which if there was a vendor there, did the board approve the course since it was at a district meeting? No. Okay. Because
Ultimately,
that was a discussion too about vendor versus the fact that it's just and we would, educational opportunities at a APTA of Louisiana district meeting, would those be blanketly approved, or
in the
concept? So
in the minutes, I believe it came down to because as Lee has helped our board remember and me as well, that these courses still, even though they're APTA Louisiana, the rules say they have to meet the content criteria and
Right,
everything.
right.
And the speaker for that did not, and the board, it was a 7-1, I believe, agreed to deny it due to the speaker qualifications. So that did not get approved, and I did communicate that to APTA Louisiana, and I got confirmation that they received my email. One other thing I'm going to say, and before we end this meeting, I just remembered I'm going to include Lee. I don't know if I'll need to do another report for the next meeting, but I might put something in like committee meetings just for you to give the board a very quick heads up about the one course that we didn't approve last time, and Charlotte told me we would just put it on this board meeting. To tell them there was one course the committee did not approve and we didn't bring it to the board because it purely didn't meet the 1 hour minimum.
Chris, that was I did the analysis for that course, and that was a question that I had for you all is, do you think that it is clear to licensees, how the determination regarding the variables in the Mergener format, in that formula, the Mergener formula, how those variables, how we come to those variables. You know, because you have the word count, you have the familiarity and complexity, of, the course content, that you have to evaluate, and you have to score it, and you have to give it a score from 1 to 5, and plug that into the formula. So, do we need to provide greater clarification to licensees on the variables that determine how we make those evaluations?
There are differing versions of the Mergener formula. That's one of the reasons I sent it to y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one on Google. It's usually four points instead of the five you mentioned as far as the level of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
But on that one, I put it as I think an advanced course still, and it was still under an hour.
Okay.
So that one was pretty clear. I just want to make sure that the formula I was using, because I have seen some that have 1 through 5 score, one have a 1 through 4 score
Mm-hmm.
on the complexity of it. I'll put them many times for my 4.1, a 2, or a 3, and just see where it comes out as that. I've had some where it was with a 2, it might be 58 minutes. With a 3, it came out to 63 minutes. For those, I'll usually, if it looks like something that could possibly go either way, I'll usually go ahead and let that one go. This particular course was definitely a basic course.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the 3 for mine, I think that's intermediate or advanced. I can't remember what it is until I'm looking at it, but it wouldn't even meet it then.
Okay. Yeah, I just, in the event that we're asked, I mean, because the idea is I think transparency is very important, and I think that, any of the licensees, who would ask, hey, how did you come up with this? What is the justification for denying this? I mean, because, the formula is, as you said, Chris, I mean, if I think we probably need to agree on what version of the Mergener formula you all are using. So that way Jeremy's not using a different formula than Chris, and then, I'm not using a different formula than you all when we're coming up with these determinations. So just in case, the question would come up, we need to be, the committee needs to be able to respond to the question of how did you come up with this determination? How did you determine that this was basic content versus intermediate content versus advanced content? And that needs to be transparent.
The one thing I want to point out to you guys, just to help you out, again, I'm here with facts, is that on the applications themselves, and so this was a core sponsor application that you all agreed it did not meet the 1 hour. So I believe this is the exact application. So they actually can tell you what they determine the instructional level to be. Granted, you don't have to agree with that. It's your assessment. But they did say intermediate, and so Chris, you said you even tried it as an intermediate, and it still did not meet the hour. So I think in terms of just how and why, they do tell you what they determine it to be in terms of instructional level. So that is another piece of data that you have when you're using that. But in terms of which version of the mergener, I don't know, to use. I'll leave that to y'all. Y'all are the experts there.
I have no problem better defining it, just so we all use the same form. But again, this is such the number of courses that I see that I have to apply this to are very few and far between. It's a rare thing when I'm actually calculating it out. I don't know about you, Chris, but I mean, I bet I do it once a quarter, twice a year, maybe.
I get a few. I get some text-based courses. There's a couple of providers that are primarily text-based.
Yeah. But it's not a lot, or at least for me, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not many. It's usually it falls pretty close in line. The reason we went to this historically was our original policy was by number of pages. And if you've ever looked at a course, some of them have PowerPoints where you have 3 words on a page, some are textbook pages.
Right.
So we changed to the Mergener, and so we had a clear way to go through that.
Yeah.
I also want to give you a historical on this particular course sponsor. They have a couple of other courses that have been rejected in the past, which appear to possibly have also been due to not meeting the hour requirement. So that might be an issue in terms of how they calculate their time. But again, the board's policy is always available on the board website, and I direct people to it all the time if they ever ask me how they should calculate or is this going to meet, etc. Yeah, it's not common to see something like this. It's But anyway, I'm just here with facts.
Yeah, Chris, if you'll email me, just send an email to the group and just, indicate what website you're using to calculate, the merger formula. So that way, like I said, there's consistency, in how it's calculated. And that way, like I s- that way we can, be able to explain to the board, okay, this is the tool we use to calculate this. This is the reason why we determined that this was, entry level or foundational content, and so, I didn't agree with that course sponsor. I didn't agree that it was an intermediate level course because I specifically looked at the course objectives and then I used Bloom's taxonomy to evaluate the course objectives and determine that those course objectives were written at the basic or foundational level. So that was not intermediate level. Those were not intermediate level course objectives.
I think for nursing or something like that, it may have been an intermediate, but for PT, I didn't see it as intermediate.
No, no. All the course require all the evaluation components. The objective just required you to regurgitate and recall information, and that's all a basic foundational level of learning. And so the idea is that I evaluated it based on that. So
I would make, I'm sorry, Lee.
good.
I was gonna say I would make a recommendation actually that you all determine which mergener formula you're using and let me hyperlink it in the policy as a recommendation. And that way the public knows which version you're using.
That's a
I think
great
it's a good
recommendation.
idea. That's a great idea.
And so if you can email us that, Chris, and between
Okay.
now and June via email, the committee can agree, yes, this one, and then I will hyperlink it in the policy where it mentions the formula itself. And that can be one of the recommended changes that we're just wanting to be clear. We want to hyperlink the exact version we're using, and that way the public ever questions it, there it is.
Okay.
I think that's
Can get that
important.
to today.
Love it.
Mhm.
Awesome. So that's an easy thing, and I think that makes a lot of sense, and that way it also provides transparency.
Yes. And that's very important.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you all again so much for your time. We did it. We got it done.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank y'all.
I'm gonna get all this taken care of, and I'll talk to y'all soon.
All right.
Thanks, fellas.
Alrighty.
See you guys.